Welcome to the MindSea podcast series, Moving Digital Health. Our guest today is Amy West, the head of U.S. Digital Transformation and Innovation at Novo Nordisk. Amy is a seasoned marketing strategist and commercial healthcare leader with over 25 years of experience. She is dedicated to bringing technological advances and innovations that transform the patient experience and improve outcomes. Thank you for joining us today, Amy.
Thanks, Ruben. I really appreciate this opportunity to chat with you.
To start, could you give us a brief overview of your background?
Sure. So I've been in the pharma industry for well over 25 years now, but I did not start in pharma. I actually started in the early day, well, I shouldn't say early days, but it was in direct response marketing in financial services and some other industries. And that was kind of the early days of data-driven decision-making and marketing. And so really cut my teeth there. And over time, I worked in some agency environments with a number of clients that were outside of pharma. So automotive, financial services, insurance, and even like AOL back in their early days. And there was also a lot of digital marketing involved as well. And then over time, through my agency life, I transitioned into some pharma clients where I saw a huge opportunity to leverage and transfer the work that we were doing in these non-healthcare spaces, like the data-driven marketing efforts, the digital marketing efforts that could be translated, again, into the pharma space to create that more one-to-one type of engagement. And so that's really how I transitioned and then got onto the pharma side of the business from a client side standpoint. I worked at Wyeth Pharmaceuticals for a little while and then moved to Novo Nordisk about 13 and a half years ago. And have been here for quite a while. It's been a great experience. Okay.
And maybe tell us a little bit more about your current role as the head of U.S. Digital Transformation and Innovation at Novo Nordisk.
No problem.
In the last few years, you've had a huge role in driving development of U.S. digital health strategy.
Yeah, it's really an exciting space. And I would say that, the digital health strategy is one piece of it. Really now what I'm doing is leading up innovation, which we almost want to say like innovation with the big I versus like the little I, because innovation is definitely digital. But there are many modalities of innovation, technology, data. Those are the things that we tend to think about because they're more the emerging areas as we think about the traditional healthcare space. But there's a lot to be said for innovation from a non-digital or non-tech space. So when we think about how we approach our relationships, how we approach our customer engagements, how we think about health equity, we obviously need to embrace digital health and digital aspects, technology and data, but we also have to think about how do we create that more human connection with our customers. And so we think about innovation from that standpoint as well, because that's just as important as what, I think comes across as maybe the cooler, fancier places, the shiny object places like the technology and the digital. It's all very important, but I don't like to lose sight of these non-tech or these non-digital innovation areas as well. But it's interesting because in pharma, our innovation traditionally has come from the science side of things, the molecule development, the advancements in that space, the clinical side. And that's not going to change. We're going to continue to stay in that space because that's really our core area of expertise. But I would say that, we recognize that alone, medication alone, isn't going to solve all the healthcare problems that we have. We have to think beyond the pill, so to speak. And that's why, the innovation hub that I'm leading, we're looking at those things. How can we drive improved experiences with healthcare, improved outcomes with our medications and beyond, so that we can really change the trajectory of the negative things that we're seeing with health outcomes. And so we have a lab. It's called the APIS Lab. and it's an internal innovation incubator. We have a framework that we customized. We built it end of 2019. It is, I would say, it's sort of it's a fit for purpose type of framework that is made up of design thinking aspects, Scrum methodologies, Lean, and different innovation methodologies with a phased approach to rapid incubation, testing, learning, iteration. And I think it's important when we think about innovation, because I think that sometimes people think it just kind of gets, comes out of the ether. And there's a process for it. There's a framework. And I think that you want to customize something that works for your purposes, and it's going to help you better meet the needs of your customers. So again, like I want to stress that innovation doesn't just happen. There's a strategic approach around it. There's a framework around it. There's a process to it, and there's a discipline to it. And, at Novo Nordisk, it is everybody's job to be innovative, whether you're actually in an innovation incubator space, or you're a brand marketer, or you're in the clinical space, or you're in procurement. We all need to be thinking about how do we better meet the needs of our customers and drive value for the business as well, by thinking about how do we optimize, how do we make things more efficient, how do we create something new that's going to really move the needle for our customers and the business.
Mm-hmm. You're right. It really is health innovation, and not just the digital side of it.
Right.
And that usually starts with a problem, right? So I'm curious, are there any specific problems that you could share with us that you've tasked the innovation group with to try and solve? Sure.
So I think the other thing before I get into that is important to think about the traditional pharma approach tends to be a bit of an inside out problem solving initiative, where it's like, how do I better position my product for this type of person, or this type of healthcare professional? Mm-hmm. When really what my team focuses in on is not really even the product. It's what is the customer's pain point? And if we think about the patient as a customer first, which is a lot of where my team's focus begins. Again, in pharma, we talk about the patient, but my team talks about the person. We want to understand you as a human being and as a person outside of being a patient, because none of us wants to be, we're all patients in theory, but we don't consider ourselves patients. Mm-hmm. So why should we be, how's that going to be appealing if we talk to you like you're a patient, you're sick, you got a problem? So we really start with understanding the individual, how they live their lives every day, the holistic individual. And we believe that if we better understand that, we'll be able to better understand your problems with having your desired health outcome. And what is that? And so, for example, that's a big topic. But to give you an example around an area that we focus on is, we're really looking at what are the root cause pain points. And not just a symptom of a pain point, but a root cause pain point. And what I mean by that is, if you talk to any brand team for any company in pharma, and you ask them, what is your patient's biggest pain point? And most likely they're going to say the cost of the product. And that is very valid. We hear about it all the time in the news. It's a real problem. And the good news is we have ways to address that with financial support programs, copay card or coupon assistance. If you qualify, you can get the product for free. So we do have those tools in place to provide that solution. But my argument is that isn't a root cause issue, because if you can't even get access to a prescription or get access to a doctor, you can't even get the opportunity to not afford your medicine, right? So what is that root cause issue that leads to a down the line pain point of the cost of the drug? And when we talk to customers, we look at our research, a lot of it is around this idea, the inconvenience of healthcare, and the fact that we're as a society getting used to, I want when I want it. The Amazon approach, or the easy button for getting me what I want now. And that is just not the way it is in healthcare. And so it's this issue that healthcare is frustrating. It's hard to navigate. It's inconvenient. Everything is controlled by the clinic setting. I have to rearrange my life to get an appointment with my doctor or to get in, even waiting in urgent care takes forever. And, meanwhile, my car broke down, my kids are sick. I've got 2 jobs I gotta get to because I gotta keep a roof over my head because, it's times are tight these days. And so having to navigate all those things that are everyday occurrences in my life to try to take care of my health and wellness, it's going to get on the back burner, right? Because it's just so inconvenient and difficult and frustrating. And I'm not getting the experience that I want. So we do a lot of work to really look at how do we improve that experience? How do we make it easier? How do we make it more convenient? How do we provide that, Amazon approach to healthcare or that easy button to healthcare? And that's when we start to think about, okay, well, can we shift the paradigm from control by the clinic setting to control by the individual based on where they are in potential? Like if we think about the connected home environment, the smart home environment, how can we leverage voice technology, sensors, the telehealth technologies so that you can be engaging with your treatment team, managing your health and wellness in the privacy of your own home and at the time that you want to do it too. So how can we really take advantage of the Internet of Things and that approach to shifting that paradigm and that locus of control, move it from the clinic to the individual. And we feel that if we can do that right and take steps to make progress there, that is going to be delivering a desired experience. It's going to help the person get more engaged with their health and wellness and have that desired improved health outcome. And then ultimately reduce the total cost of care down the road, which is really a huge burden on our entire economy.
Of course. So as an example, I know you played a key role in the diabetes patient support and adherence program, Cornerstones for Care. Could you tell us a little bit about how you brought the patient into that process to, design the program around them?
Sure. So I actually built that platform. I think we launched it about 11 years ago now. It is still alive and well today. It is our diabetes support program for the entire diabetes portfolio at Novo Nordisk. And the original launch of that program, the whole concept was how do we make your experience with, engaging in this type of platform as individualized and specific to you as possible. And it was really the first time in the organization, this is, well over a decade ago. So we were, taking the information that people were giving us when they would register and asking them questions beyond just the typical demographic information around their preferences, their pain points, their certain things that went beyond the traditional like address, name, email, things like that. And we use that information to customize an experience for you whenever you would come back to the site and log in. So because we knew that, you're someone who was recently diagnosed with diabetes. You're currently treating with, let's say, non-injectables, and this is what you're probably looking for. So we're giving you this type of information versus someone who might have signed up who said they've been dealing with their disease progression for quite a while. They're on a basal bolus therapy. So they have different needs based on where they are. So we wanted to understand you as a person first and where you are in your diabetes journey so that when you would come to us, we were relevant. We gave you the information that you would benefit from easily. You wouldn't have to do a lot of searching. And we customize that experience to, again, help you be more informed and more engaged based on where you are in your continuum of care.
So at MindSea, we work a lot in building mobile apps for patients and users, and so that's a lot of the time the perspective that I look at things in these programs. I'm just wondering, how do you see the role of mobile apps evolving as part of patient support programs?
I think there are a lot of them out there. In some ways, I feel like the world doesn't need another app, whether it's a health app or something else. I think what's going to be really important is, again, you want to be where the person is. So don't make them have to buy something more or do something more. Embed it where they are. Again, for this easy access, for the convenience factor. You want to embed in the places where they are, and you also want to have an offering as an app developer, to be ubiquitous. You want to be in all the different sort of access places. And I think the other important thing is you want to make sure that there is connectivity, depending on what it is, with the healthcare provider network, whether that's embedding in their EHRs, embedding in their health systems. But again, do it in a way that's going to be easy for the healthcare professional to manage, make it part of their workflow. They're getting hit, the healthcare professionals are getting hit with a lot of requirements as it relates to digital, and they're experiencing a lot of digital fatigue. So as pharma manufacturers, as app developers in the healthcare space, if you're creating yet another app, it's just one more thing that the healthcare professional is going to have to learn how to deal with, and it's really not feasible. So how do you integrate into their workflow? How do you make it easier for them? And how do you create that connection, that easy connection between the patient and the provider? That's going to be really key as well.
I agree. Part of our job as a builder of technology is to really make it the experience easier for the user, and like you said, make it fit into their life, and for the practitioner as well, to simplify them, because a whole bunch of fractured tools is not going to simplify their lives. It actually increases burnout if they have to constantly context switch between all these different systems. I
would also add to that too, that the more ambient you can be in your data collection, the better. Because when it comes to someone who might be dealing with a health issue, chronic health challenges, they don't want to constantly be reminded that they're sick or they have a problem. So that, again, it goes back to the experience. How they want to feel normal. They don't want to be reminded that they're sick. So the more you can make it seamless collection, ambient collection, I think the better off everybody's going to be, because the more likely people are going to be willing to just engage with it, because they don't even know they're engaging with it, right? It's easy. The easy button is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've heard of some interesting ways of doing that. For example, taking a voice recording and then being able to judge a person's mood or emotional state based on the previous recordings of them, and measure it over the time. So they're not just choosing an emoji of like, oh, I'm smiley or happy, yes, or grumpy. It's like, no, it's actually taking real data, as opposed to them trying to self-report. And there's a lot of other very interesting ways of collecting that ambient data. Do you have any other experience or ways that you've seen that working?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some really interesting things going on. Now, again, some of these things are specific to certain therapeutic areas, but I'm seeing a lot of interesting things as it relates to mobility tracking. People just typing on their computers, on their phones. What is the speed, the rate at which their fingers are moving? Things that you do every day, but you don't realize that. Let's say you're someone who might have early onset Parkinson's disease or some other mobility degenerative disease. You don't even know this is happening. Or if you've been diagnosed, you can kind of manage the progression of it just because of the things that you do every day. it's an easy way to monitor and manage. I think that's really interesting what's happening in that space. There are other things too that it isn't really necessarily an ambient collection, but it makes things easier if you're trying to manage something. So I've seen some really interesting technology with breath analysis to identify, certain volatile organic compounds coming through the breath that could be an indicator of chronic kidney disease or other things that typically would have had to have been identified through an invasive means, through a blood draw or some other sort of invasive test. So that's not necessarily ambient, but I'm very interested in this non-invasive biomarker detection space as well, because I know working in the diabetes space, if you've been diagnosed with diabetes and at a certain point you should be checking your blood sugar levels every day with finger sticks, you should be getting your A1Cs checked every 3 months. That just doesn't happen because it is painful. The A1C checks, you got to get in to see your doctor. It's very hard to get into the doctor every 3 months. And that's a blood draw type of thing. But again, it's painful and it's invasive. And that is a big deterrent to people really optimally managing their health and wellness because of those types of things. But if there was a way, it's not available yet, but if you could do a means to non-invasively check your blood sugar levels or your A1Cs, I think you'd see a significant difference in the engagement in management as well as the outcomes, because it's just easier, it doesn't hurt, and it's just less invasive.
Agreed. Are there any other exciting developments at Novo Nordisk or innovations that you were working on that you could share?
Well, I would say there are a lot. I have to be careful about what I can share because some of these things are not necessarily available. But we've been doing some work to acquire some companies that have some really interesting technologies. And as we think about building for our future, I think again one of the most obviously because I'm biased in this because I'm actually leading up the innovation incubator in the U.S. But the fact that the company was willing to invest in this and approve something like this and invest in it in pharma is very, very unique and very different. And that in and of itself has been extremely innovative. And the work that's been coming out, we've been in existence really as a centralized unit for about not even quite 2 years yet. And our framework and process has really taken some ideas that might have never been considered and moved them in a direction where we are now able to scale some of these things. The other thing that's been really nice is this type of incubation process. It has helped close the gap that we've traditionally had between early stage R&D and the commercial areas. Because when you think about traditional pharma, it's the innovation starts on the scientific bench. It takes a long time. There's a lot of investment and focus. There's a lot of failure that goes into it before you can actually get to something that's approved by the FDA and into market. It's a huge space. And it's really important to make sure that as you're moving and progressing this early stage opportunity to a real commercially viable product, that by the end of that journey, there will be a market for it. You don't want to create a solution looking for a problem. And I think sometimes pharma, we've been victims of that just by virtue of how we are organized, the sort of the silo from the very scientific spaces to the commercial spaces. And you run the risk of spending a lot of time, money, and effort, like millions and billions of dollars, into something that might not net out because it's a great solution, it's amazing, but it's not going to meet my needs. So there's going to be no value exchange there. And so I think with the work that my team has been doing has really helped, again, close some of that gap, and working with the scientific minds that are very different than a commercial mind, and really driving home the need to take that human-centric patient pain point starting point and move it through the process. So I think that's really interesting. And I think it's one of those things that goes unnoticed for the most part, but it makes a huge difference. And I think over time, we're going to see a lot of benefit there as well.
Mm-hmm. You've said that healthcare should be considered a consumer-focused marketplace. Maybe could we dig in a little bit more on how that mentality has the potential to drive real meaningful change?
Well, I think that if you look at what's happening now with inflation, the cost of everything is going up. And for even before COVID, we as individuals with our healthcare costs, whether you have private insurance or not, you are paying more out of your own pocket to cover your healthcare needs. And by virtue of that, you now are going to be more choiceful in what you select. You're going to be more choiceful in what doctor you go to. And that therein lies the rise of consumerism in healthcare. And so you can't, the days of, the doctor will see you now are over. It's really going to be, we're starting to see a flip in that. We talked to, I've seen this in articles. I've heard this from people. I've heard this in research that a lot of people, when they're making their physician selections, if you don't offer telehealth services or virtual care services, they're not going to go with you. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing when you're looking at a healthcare condition that's a crowded marketplace, like diabetes or cardiovascular disease, where there are many, many different treatment options. We see them on TV all the time. We see them in every magazine. We see them, online advertisements. People have choices and they're asking their doctor for one over the other. And obviously the doctor at the end of the day is the one that makes the decision. But, and depending on what the situation is, but people are asking those questions. They're being more thoughtful about how they're going to spend their healthcare dollars. And so it's really important that we recognize that and appreciate that, because what goes along with that is not just the solution, but the experience and the expectation. Are you meeting their expectations, or is the experience positive? If it's not good, they might switch and go somewhere else, or it could have a negative health outcome. So we have to think about the experience and the expectation piece in addition to the medication and the clinical solution that we have.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting to hear that perspective, especially from the U.S. and where I'm in Canada and in Nova Scotia, especially, the shortage of doctors is so severe that people really don't have a choice. The wait lists are so long to get to have a family doctor,
wow,
and which results in all sorts of other problems. But essentially, that choice you're talking about in our medical system, isn't happening right now because there is so much more demand than we have doctors to cover.
Yeah, well, we're definitely seeing that shortage of physicians as well. This is what you also see the rise of the extender group, the physician's assistants, the nurse practitioners, nurse navigators. So you're seeing these broader ranges within the treatment team beyond the MD.
Yes, and I think that's a very positive step, and something that's happening here as well. Just slowly, as it needs to be, as it should be, but it's probably happening slower than most people would like.
The point I'd like to make too, as it relates to digital health and technology and healthcare, which is fantastic. And everything you see now, especially since post-COVID, it's all been accelerated. It's all about digital health. And I think that's great, but it's very important to remember that there are a lot of people in the world that do not have access to digital, mm-hmm. or don't have access to a lot of these technologies that are being experimented with. When you're thinking about consumer-facing tools and resources. And that's where, again, when I talk about innovation, it's really important when we think about health equity. Let's not over-index on the digital health stuff, because the traditional approaches are the low tech, high touch aspects are really important too. For example, if you're, let's just say, in an area that doesn't have good access to physicians, maybe we create mobile units that will go out and get to the person and help them get treated if they're in these rural areas or wherever they are. It obviously needs to be a scalable solution, but digital is not going to fix everything, because again, there are a lot of people that just don't have access to that. And, we have to be mindful of those that don't have those accesses, and we find ways to innovate so that we make it accessible to them in a way that works for them as well, without necessarily the smart watches or the telehealth interventions, whatever that is.
I definitely agree. And for me, working at a mobile app development company, there is that temptation to hit everything with the app hammer, because we build apps, so we see
Right.
problems as potential app solutions. I understand that bias as well, and we've definitely spread out our abilities and knowledge to be more technology agnostic, in terms of when people come to us with a problem, it's not just about building a mobile app. It's about determining the right technology, the right platform, the right method to solve this problem. Or
potentially use that technology or that data to support from a digital standpoint, but to also support from a non-digital standpoint. The insight, the data is there. Now how you create the modality of intervention, it can be the high tech or it can be the low tech, high touch.
Agreed. And for us, sometimes it's just realizing where our limitations are and saying, hey, this is not a technology solution. But within our network, we know experts, we know other people that could potentially help solve some of those non-technical challenges. But I fully agree. It is more of a complex process than just the digital side. Although there's so much potential that I see for digital health.
Oh, yes.
It will also free up resources for those other things. If we can scale services and make them more accessible through telehealth and increase the efficiency of a single doctor's day, then maybe have more time in their day to deal with those the in-person visits, actually spend more time with their patients and less time fighting with technology that's not working for them.
Yeah.
I wonder, for to switch gears a little bit, is there a specific event or point that you got inspired and really about the healthcare space?
I mean, there are so many challenges out there, and the thing that has always really inspired me is, and it's kind of the gap area. It's that we've been so focused on the clinical innovation, the medical solutions, which are fantastic and life-saving and critical. But I feel like we lose sight of the person, the human being.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with this rise of consumerism in healthcare, the time has come where we can't take that for granted anymore. We've got to merge these things together and move forward in bringing our products to market in a way that it's supporting the individual holistically. It is delivering an experience that is positive, that motivates the person to be more on top of their own health and wellness, because the reality is you as an individual have to take care of your health every single minute of every single day. You're only seeing your doctor once, twice, maybe more than that if you've got like a situation where you're going in more frequently. But for the most part, you rarely get to actually spend time with the healthcare professional. So, it's how do we make it easier for people to engage in their health and wellness, have a better outcome? And I think a lot of that does lie in the human being aspect of it, and really understanding that, I've been diagnosed with something, but that's not who I am. I am a single mother with 3 kids, working 2 jobs, and I've got a lot on my plate every day. And the last thing I want to be doing is worrying about, getting my prescription filled and taking my medication and all of that. But to me, it's really bringing through the human side of the equation. We're always very focused on the science. We're always very focused on the healthcare professional. We're always focused on the patient as you've got a problem, we want to solve it. But it's not enough to just come up with the medication. It's got to be about how do we make it easier? How do we facilitate the utilization? And then how do we make it easier for you to be motivated and engaged to stay on top of this yourself? Because at the end of the day, who's going to have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, it is really about those patient stories. And, when you hear about the positive outcomes of when an intervention has really worked, and you see the success and how it impacted like that one individual's life, and hear them speak about what a big impact and positive impact it had on their health and life, is just mind blowing. You think, wow, well, like how can we do that more? How can we bring that experience to more people? And again, I feel there is so much unexplored potential out there to make that happen.
Agree.
So in your career, you've worked in both marketing and healthcare. And how do you see those complementing each other, and the different crossover from the 2 disciplines?
Well, I think, again, when I was saying I started my career out in the direct response world, it was direct response mail, direct response television. It was all data-based. And it is really about the data collection, testing, a lot of testing that would go on, and then you could actually see the results. And that's something that I always gave me a lot of satisfaction, because I think sometimes in the healthcare space, we go out and we do things that we're not necessarily measuring them, or we're not able to measure them in a way that's really going to give us a determination of what's working, what's not. And in the direct response world, you're constantly testing, you're constantly changing messages, and everything's tested all the time, whether it's a headline to paragraph copy to the way you address an envelope. All these different things are being tested all the time. You can do them really, really quickly. And it was the same thing on the direct response television side. You could change things up really quickly and see what the response was. And so that idea of, again, taking the data and the insight and applying it to marketing in the healthcare space, I felt that there's a real opportunity there, because a lot of it was kind of a one size fits all approach. Mm-hmm. And by translating and transferring my direct response methodologies and background into the pharma space, I was able to show how different marketing campaigns succeeded versus others, and how we wanted to invest our dollars in one channel versus another. But then also getting into targeting is not really the right word. It's really, how are we identifying the right customer types to go to with what types of messages? Because the other thing you could run into is making a decision that something didn't work because it didn't necessarily, perform the way you wanted it to, but maybe you didn't send it to the right person. So that was about, the segmentation piece, and really getting into understanding how to identify the right subpopulations within a population, and what are the right messages. And that really is also a precursor to where we are now, where now we're trying to apply these more holistic data sets, like the social determinants of health considerations, that take into consideration your community, your social influencers, your education level, the environment in which you live, your family makeup. That's just drilling down more and more and giving us an opportunity to, again, better understand you as an individual and better understanding what type of intervention is going to be right for you versus somebody else. And so again, it creates more precision in the identification and the intervention. And I find that really interesting as well, because from a scientific side, I'm not a clinician, but I think what's happening in precision medicine with genetics and genomics and identification of different genes that are cancer causing and hereditary traits, things like that. I mean, they're almost applying that now in the scientific space as well. So
Mhm.
the more precise we can be, the more we're going to be able to deliver an intervention that is going to be the right solution for that person at the right time.
Yeah, because there are specific genes that can make people more or less, predisposed to a medication working, right? So
Yes.
let's say there's a generic medication, so many percentage of the population has a gene where it just doesn't work for them. So they take it for a few weeks, it doesn't work. They, get another appointment with their doctor, try something else. And then that cycle just repeats until, they find one that works. And I've heard the case that if we did genetic testing up front and we could identify some of those markers and just skip to the 2 months later where we prescribe them the right medication, based on their gene profile, that would save a lot of pain for the patient and time and resources as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a fascinating space, and I think that's where we also get into the privacy side of things as well.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a lot of work to do to make people feel comfortable that they can trust us with their information and their data, that it's going to be protected, that it's going to be used properly, that it's not going to be breached in some way. And so there's a lot of work to be done in that space as well. And that's, I think, why in a lot of ways healthcare is kind of a laggard when we think about digital technology data innovation, because of the HIPAA requirements and data privacy considerations. And there's a lot of work to be done because it's very difficult and it's very tricky. And the last thing we want to do is have any sort of a data breach. And the thing is, they do happen. And when it happens, when it hits the news, even if it's in a regional space, if it's a health system, it kind of impacts everybody. It gives you pause. And so it is a scary space. And that's another big area of focus and utmost importance to the work that we're doing in the pharma space, securing the data.
Yeah, the stakes are high when it comes to managing personal health information, and especially when you get down to the level of someone's DNA and everything else that might be tied to that, in a patient record. And then all of a sudden, if that gets breached, that's a huge, huge deal. So, that while, we want to push that innovation forward, it has to be, tempered by this caution of being very thoughtful about how we handle people's personal information and also ensuring its security.
Yep.
So what do you think are some of the other barriers standing in the way of digital health innovation?
Depending on, when I think about it from the pharma standpoint, because I work for a pharmaceutical manufacturer, I think that we struggle a bit with, the operating model around it. Our core science, our core innovation is with science. And as we look to digitize and transform our organizations with digital, we're trying to digitize a traditional pharma model. And I think this is the case with most pharma companies, which is why I think a lot of us you hear about all the time, they're always shifting and reorganizing, and people are coming and going, and you're seeing people being pulled in from non-traditional pharma industries like Amazon and Google coming into pharma, and then they leave and they go back because of how the regulatory environment is so restrictive. We are, pharma, we're not technology companies, we're not digital companies. And so it takes time, and we're learning as we go. And I think that is a big challenge area for all of pharma. Like, what is that operating model? What is the vision for it? How do we need to do it in a way that's going to be synergistic? And it can't be, okay, we're going to digitize this area of the business. It's got to be, it's got to be synergistic. It has to be coordinated and pulled through. And it's hard to do that when you're not set up that way. And if you're trying to set up a legacy operating model, it's going to be difficult. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big area of challenge as we think about digital. I think another area is just from a regulatory environment, what's considered software as a medical device, and when what are the I mean, I think there are clear lines around what it is and what it isn't, but how do we play in that space, and what are the implications for our core area of the business, which is our medications, and how do we build around that? Are we investing more in the CMD area? How do we invest in our core? Like, it's sort of the balance of the investments that we're going to be making as we think about expectations of the healthcare market in the future. We're seeing the rise of digital therapeutics, which is really an interesting space. And what are the implications for that? So I just think that it's a huge frontier out there, and I think we're all invested in it. It's just figuring it out is going to take some time. But again, I think that a rapid test and learn approach with appropriate guardrails and regulatory considerations and privacy considerations are going to help us all get there. So,
yeah, I did see the announcement of a partnership with Microsoft as well for AI drug discovery. Were you involved in that at all, or?
I was not involved in that directly, but obviously there's a lot of interest in partnering and finding the right collaborators that can bring their expertise in the technology or digital space into where our expertise is, which is in the scientific molecule space. So I think that's a really great area of opportunity. And we're seeing that across the industry, where there's a recognition now by pharma. None of the pharma industries would, or players would really partner with anybody because of, exclusivity rights and PI and things like that, or IP. But now I think we recognize, as we see this shift towards digital transformation and technology, that's not our core focus, but that's okay. We shouldn't do it alone. We should be partnering together, because we can be better together. There's a synergy there when you bring the experts in different specific areas together. We can be greater than the sum of our parts. And that's really, I think, an opportunity for the entire industry.
Definitely agree. And when you look into the future of those partnerships and what that might result in the few years, like, what do you see in the crystal ball that you would love to see come to reality?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. I mean, I think that what I would really like is, I would like to see us be able to move more quickly. It's a challenge, though, again, because of the regulatory environment that we're in. I think, pharma is risk averse for very good reason. How do we sort of manage these very real challenge areas and be able to do things more quickly? Hopefully with as we think about innovation from an internal standpoint, we're bringing in new digital and technology and data tools and resources that might help facilitate our ability to do that and move things more quickly. But again, we're still pretty slow. And again, it's just by virtue of the very heavily regulated environment that we're in. But I personally would love to be able to see us move more quickly. I would love to be able to see us advance and to make advancements to improve outcomes more quickly, and also build the relationships with our customers, whether it's the patient side, the healthcare professional side, the payer side, to make it a positive collaboration. Because I just feel like when you think about healthcare in general, there's like this, anybody who's had to engage with the healthcare system, it's not fun. It's frustrating. How do we take that? How do we reduce the pain point of that and make it easier and less burdensome, less frustrating? Because I think if we can do that, it would be easier and people would be more motivated to be on top of their health and wellness. And I think we could have better health outcomes. We could kind of remove those pain points from the system.
Yeah.
Nice to see that.
Agree. And I also think that, getting patients access to their own data, and a system that allows that and gives them, over agency and ownership over it as well. So they do have that choice to, take it from one practitioner to another, and not have gaps there. And I know that's going to be very difficult to make that work. But certainly will empower the patient in the future and help solve their problems. Yeah.
And I would love it if we could move more quickly as an industry in the Alzheimer's space. Some of these, in some of the rare disease spaces that are now starting to get some attention. But if we could get things moving more quickly and getting some real solutions and real options for people would be great, because these are some things that are really very painful for a lot of people.
Yes. Well, one small step at a time, and we'll keep marching forward. Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. For those who's listening, if you enjoy the conversation, please go to movingdigitalhealth.com to subscribe to the MindSea newsletter and be notified about future episodes. Thank you.